Good morning everybody and welcome to this meeting of Mid-Suffolk District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor Susie Morley and I will be chairing this meeting today. I'm just going to first remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off, and we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app, so please make sure you're logged in and ready to use the app. I'd just like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. I'm just going to move now to the agenda. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillor Gould.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registerable or non-registerable interest by members. Are there any to declare? No. Item 3 is MCA/22/28 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of October 2022. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Haddingham, and a seconder, please. Councillor Richardson. Thank you. If you could conduct the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress. Yes, Councillor.
I'm voting for some technical difficulties, so can I give my vote?
Of course. 4. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Item 4 is to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
Thank you, Chair. We have received over 500 entries, of which 143 was valid, regarding report MCA 22/27 Elmswell Exemplar Housing Scheme in Elmswell.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to make a brief comment following the receipt of that petition. As members will be aware, following the well-attended engagement event in Elmswell in November about the potential to deliver an exemplar housing scheme in the village, we are reviewing the feedback received and to have further meetings arranged with key stakeholders in the coming weeks. We want to work with the local community to ensure they have the facilities they need. However, the ultimate decision over primary school provision for Elmswell rests with Suffolk County Council as the local educational authority, and they have been clear that they have no plans for a further school in the village. We are, however, keen to find the best solution for the local community, and we are busy working our way through the feedback received while continuing conversations so that our next steps can be considered. This matter will also be going to overview and scrutiny in January, and we welcome the opportunity to share further information, including feedback from the recent engagement event, which we estimate around 200 people attended, and I'd like to thank everyone for their engagement to date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Item 5 is questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
And item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or the Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
Item 7 is the forthcoming decisions list. Are there any comments on those items? No? Thank you. So moving on now to item 8. This is the General Fund Financial Monitoring Report for 2022 to 23, quarter 2, MCA/22/29. I'm going to invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the first of my 2 reports today, I'd like to introduce MCA 2229, which is a General Fund Financial Monitoring for quarter 2 of 22-23. So it's based on 6 months of actual financial data from April to September this year, which is then used to forecast the outturn for the full year 22-23. And the report sets out to explain any significant variances against budget. In my introduction to the Q1 outturn report, I indicated how inflationary cost pressures have built up a real head of steam since the start of this calendar year. And at that point, we were forecasting additional cost increases of 1.184 million in 22-23. And we've now revised that upwards, albeit only by very marginally, to 1.238 million, an increase of 54,000. Now, to offset that increase, that we have 399,000 of carry forward forwards, and that leaves a net expenditure overspend of 839,000. So when allowance is taken for the 500,000 inflationary pressure reserve, which we set up at the end of last year, that leaves just 339,000 to be offset against the Growth and Efficiency Fund. We had budgeted a 3.351 million surplus to go into the Growth and Efficiency Fund this year. So with the overspend now forecasted, that still leaves a surplus position of revenue compared to expenditure of just over 3 million. So in essence, this quarter 2 outturn report confirms we are still very much in a similar position to that which we anticipated in the quarter 1 outturn report. And we therefore anticipate still having reserves of just under 20 million by the year end. In addition to the revenue budget, this report looks at our capital programme. The 3 pages in Appendix B give the full details. We spent 6.184 million in the first 6 months of the year, the bulk of that being on Gateway 14. We expect our total capital spend for the year to be a hefty 29.829 million by year end, with significant capital expenditure to come in the second half of the year. That includes over 2 million on replacement refuge freighters, a large investment into Mid-Suffolk growth, and a substantial further investment into the Gateway 14 project. I'd now like to move the recommendations in paragraph 3, which clearly state the information is for now just for noting. So I'd request a fellow Cabinet Member to second these recommendations, and then I, along with Rebecca from the Finance team, are here to answer any questions that Cabinet Members or other councillors may have. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Richardson?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second this report.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from Cabinet? Do we have any questions from any other members? Councillor Eburn?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for that introduction. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. Firstly, within the corporate resources area, there's the £500,000 of vacancy management. Could you explain how that's offset? Because I understand that goes across all services. Secondly, with regards to the capital, there are some very big carry forwards in the capital, sort of on play equipment, car parks, the disabled facilities grants, and the strategic investment fund. And in the report at 5.8, it says some items are unlikely to be fully spent, and I wonder if you could just give us a bit more detail on those. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eburn. Let me just get my papers into order here. £500,000 of £500,000 of vacancy management. My understanding is that that's been budgeted against corporate resources, but of course the effect is across all areas. But if Rebecca, do you want to just add a bit more to that? Put a bit of flesh on the bones, please?
Yes, certainly that is correct. So we budget for the assumed 5% transitional vacancies that we'll see through the year within corporate resources. So on the corporate resources line, that shows as an overspend effectively when we look at that in isolation. The underspends that are being seen due to actual transitional vacancies will be throughout the services. So you'll see underspends in each of the services relating to salaries, and then the corporate resources line will show an overspend against that budget.
Thank you for that answer. So in terms of actually understanding where the vacancy ones are, one has to look at individual service areas and just assume that 500k is split across all of the services. One doesn't have to add them all up across the different service areas, as it were. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Rebecca's nodding, and so am I.
Yes, that's right. So they are there within the individual services. It's really hard to split them out separately because of the way the reserve funding and everything else feeds into that. But yes, they are there.
Any questions?
Sorry. In terms of the question about the capital, as you say, there's quite a large amount of carry forward anticipated, a total of 6 million, and the details are there. I think the comments that try to explain where the status of each project and where the carry forward is, but obviously on these long-term capital, there will inevitably be carry forwards. So, if you want to just specific ones you were asking about, can you just?
Well, I picked a few: play equipment, car parks, disabled. We always seem to have a problem with the disabled facilities grant and carry forward. It's just, is there obviously last year was kind of COVID, but this year, is there another rationale or another reasoning for the fact that these are being so much is being carried forward, and just a bit more sort of detail on that, really. Thank you.
I think any more detail to drill down we'll have to supply outside the meeting, but I think as you say, COVID did delay things, and in terms of catching up on these large programs, it will take more than a year. And as you say, the discretionary facilities grants, we always seem to have an issue of spending those, but as the comment says there's now a new social media campaign to try and encourage more applications.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
Sorry about that. Yes, Councillor Eburne's got most of the issues I was interested in, but just a further question on that capital resources figure. Rather surprised, the budget was 1.7, the forecast is 2.5 million spent. But the 500k that you were talking about, surely we knew about at budget time, so it would have been incorporated then. So a little surprised to see an explanation that gives us some bank charges, 70k and 30k of insurance contract. That's 100 out of a 790k overspend. Even if I take 100 off 790, I don't think I end up with 500. So I still really don't understand that issue. So a little more would be good. The other question I had really was looking at the carry forwards, basically the earmarked reserves. A number of these we seem to be spending, as one would hope, for good things, and there's some like planning, legal, which are clearly things that will sit there in case something happens for some time. I was surprised climate change and biodiversity, we have 927 grand there, we've only spent 72 in the whole year, and this is something which most of us see as pretty vital at the moment. So I wondered if there was, well, there's two things then, the corporate resources and just a word about climate change and biodiversity. Why are we not moving ahead with that? Thank you.
So, I think in terms of the question on corporate resources, which if I understood your question is the bit more detail about the 790,000 and trying to build that up from the explanations given. I think we need to perhaps just take that away and look at that, in terms of for a more detailed answer, unless Rebecca just feels she can answer it. But just for that, if I can just sort of say, in terms of the earmarked reserves, this is one of the big areas we'll be looking at in terms of the new 23-24 budget to sort of justify what those are and, well, just the carrying value of them.
Thank you. Certainly an explanation of the 1.7 versus 2.5 million in detail a bit later would be quite welcome.
Yes, we can provide that detail. So 500,000 of that is the vacancy, and there are lots of other smaller bits building up the difference between that and the key variances, but we will provide that detail of what exactly that is.
Thank you. Any more questions? So I'll now open up the item for debate. Does anybody wish to debate this item? No? Okay. So the recommendations are that, subject to any further budget variations that arise during the rest of the financial year, the net expenditure overspend position of £839,000 and forecast reserve movements referred to in section 5.5 and appendix A of the report be noted, and also that the revised 2021-22 capital programme referred to in appendix B and section 5.9 be noted. So I'm now going to ask the governance officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress. That is 8 votes for. Chair, that's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Item 9 is MCA/22/30, and this is the Housing Revenue Account Financial Monitoring for 2022-23. And I'm going to invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce this report.
Thank you again, Madam Chairman. So I'm now pleased to introduce report MCA 2230, the Housing Revenue Account Financial Monitoring for Quarter 2. And as for the General Fund, we've now got 6 months of actual financial data with which to extrapolate the current year's outlook. And at this point, the information is for noting only. In contrast to the budget set for 22-23, which showed a surplus of 95,000, we now are forecasting a deficit of 675,000. This is therefore a 770,000 adverse movement to budget, and it's a deterioration of 281,000 compared to our forecasted outturn at the Q1 period. Under the housing management expense area, we're now forecasting an overspend of 132,000 due to increase in the staff costs from the National Pay Award and from the new posts created to support the service transformation. We have a £48,000 contract increase from Public Realms grounds maintenance contract, and other items were of a similar magnitude to the Q1 forecast. For this Q2 reporting, we split out from building services as a separate line item the cost of subcontractors to support the trades team in completing the backlog work arising from during the COVID restrictions. Here we had a budget of 588,000, which we're now forecasting to cost 760,000. Subcontractor costs to support the trades team in completing void properties, along with associated material costs, are also have a significant cost overrun. That's offset in part by an increase in recharges. If the forecasted deficit proves to be accurate, and clearly this is still a big if at the moment, given the deterioration from the Q1 extrapolation, then the HRA reserves balances at the end of the year will be 6.3 million. Those reserves would be adequate to finance several years of HRA deficit at its present run rate, but clearly we should not underestimate the challenges facing our HRA and the urgent need for a service transformation to bring it back to a long-term sustainable position. The capital position is set out in Appendix A. In the first 6 months, we've spent 6.8 million across several new build and acquisition sites, 1.282 million on planned maintenance, along with 150,000 on adaptations to the stock and 33,000 on ICT projects. By the year end, we anticipate a total capital spend of 24.481 million and a carry forward into the next year of 18.642 million. I'd now like to move the recommendations in paragraph 3, which are merely to note the revenue budget net adverse variance and to note the progress on the capital programme. And I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to second these recommendations. Then we'll be happy to take questions from Cabinet Members and other councillors. Thank you.
Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm very happy to second that.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from Cabinet? Any questions from any other members? Councillor Field?
Just looking at the table for the under Paris 6.5, the table talks about total income and total expenditure, obviously. I note that the housing management and building services, if you take those two things and combine them, they come to about 50% of the rental income. And obviously that rental income has to pay back capital and interest on loans. So my question really is that sort of ratio of spend typical of other housing authorities, or do we spend more or do we spend less? It's particularly interesting because, as we all see, we're talking about a 12% increase in one and a 9% hike in the other. So I think it's, are we looking at a big increase on a low spend or a big increase on a spend which is already in line with the average? The second thing, really wondering, looking at housing management overspend, obviously staff costs are an understandable issue and that's adequately explained, but I noticed there's 50k in missing Care Plus invoices. There's 27k historically budgeted incorrectly. There's 16k of mobile software missing from the budget. There's 6k of Western Court water rates not included in the budget. I wonder, this does look, quite a inaccurate budget process, and wonder whether Cabinet members doing anything to improve the accuracy in the future. Perhaps we'll leave it there for a minute. Do have a couple of others.
Councillor Whitehead.
Sorry. Yes, thank you, Councillor Field. In terms of benchmarking our costs against other councils, I don't have any information to hand. I'm not even sure if that has been done, but I guess it would be quite a useful exercise to carry out. But it is very much a staff-intensive process, managing our council housing stock. In terms of these inaccuracies, I think the total, you identify about the 4 items in there which come to just under 100,000, which in the scheme of nearly 7 million isn't a large figure, but it's still, it's not something to be happy with, really. So we, in terms of our budgeting each year, we do try and, learn from past mistakes and try and reduce the level of those. Anything you want to add, Rebecca?
Yes, just to confirm that we have looked in quite a bit more detail this year at that budget, and with a new business partner as well, with fresh eyes on it. A lot of these things have come out of the woodwork during the last year as a result of that. So yeah, we will continue to with that process to ensure that we're getting that as accurately as we can.
I'll come back. I mean, thank you. It obviously implies to me staff changes and a lack of experience, and people are forgetting quite large items, which doesn't look good for our residents. The next question really on building service, where you have an adverse of 338, you talk about substantial costs of materials, some items going up by 130%. That might be 3 tap washers that went up an awful lot. So I was wondering how much is the materials as that part of that 638k overspend? And the 172k on repairs and maintenance, a little bit lower down. The overspend is, it says, due to the use of subcontractors. The same sort of wording is in the 638k and in a few bullet points above. I wondered whether I need to add those two things together to get a total overspend on subcontractors, or are they actually, is the second item part of the first one? Thank you.
No, the two items do need to be added together. The first item relates to completing work on void properties and getting them back to a satisfactory situation. The second one talks about the completing the backlog of jobs built up, these general repair and maintenance jobs built up during the COVID restrictions. So you need to add the two together.
Thank you. And the amount of materials included in the 638k?
Well, I don't have that to hand. I don't know if Rebecca has, or whether we'd come back later.
Yes, likewise, I don't have that detail to hand, but we can take that away and find that out for you.
Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I too was going to ask about the sort of missing costs and things, because it just struck me that sort of budgeting and cost control wasn't as rigorous as it should be, but you've answered that one now, but I do think we need to keep an eye on that one. My other question is the lack of capital spend. So we've spent, I think, 8.2 million against 43.1 million, but I just wondered how that impacts on the overall budget in terms of interest payable and so on. What kind of effect does that have? Thank you.
Well, any delay to the capital programme against the budget would have a reduction in interest payable because of delays there. So it should generally be seen as positive. But of course, bear in mind that interest payable rates are significantly higher than when we budgeted last year. That would have the opposite effect as well.
Yeah, because presumably the interest payable is, you know, we've got fairly fixed rates on lots of our on what we're paying. But I just wondered if that was able to be quantified, and if it is, where can I kind of find it? Obviously, we want to spend the budget, you know, we want to spend the capital, but it would just be good to know what that actual impact is. And I appreciate if you haven't got the figures to hand, then I'd just like to be aware of those. Thank you.
Well, if you look at table on 6.5, you'll see at the moment we aren't showing any variances against either depreciation, interest payable, or revenue contribution to capital. That's an area which historically has tended to catch up with us at the year end or towards the end of the year, and I know it's an area that Melissa and Rebecca are looking at working on to fine-tune that better during the updates during the year.
Thank you. Now open up for debate. Does anybody wish to debate the item? So the recommendations are that, subject to any further budget variations that arise during the rest of the financial year, the adverse variance of £770,000 referred to in section 6.5 of the report be noted, and also that the 2022 to 23 revised capital programme referred to in Appendix A and section 6.13 be noted. I'll now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Moving on now to item 10. This is MCA/22/34. I'm the Cabinet member for this item. So just a quick summary. This provides a selection of performance highlights for each of our 6 strategic priorities. And it's just intended to give Mid-Suffolk members an opportunity to consider our achievements for quarter 2 in 2022 to 23 before. So I'm just going to select a couple of items from each of our portfolios, and then if anybody's got any questions, we'll allow the Cabinet members to answer any questions. So for economy, we had 9 new businesses being supported by the Innovate Local scheme in Stowmarket. In an environment, we've got just under 18,500 garden waste subscribers signed up. In customers, 145 visits to the customer access points in Stowmarket and a 12% reduction in calls from the previous quarter. For communities, we had a total of 12 new antisocial behaviour cases discussed, and also community development grants was established and open to applications in quarter 2. In wellbeing, 39,357 households were supported with council tax energy rebate under both the mandatory and the discretionary schemes, and this was almost £5.4 million spent and distributed to our residents. In housing, there was something like 56 cases where homelessness was successfully prevented or relieved, and this is an increase of 25 cases from the previous quarter. And in terms of the health of the organisation, an average of 1.8 number of sickness days per full-time equivalent, which is a slight increase from quarter 1, with a total of 974 days lost to sickness, which is a decrease from the previous quarter. I'll now ask for a seconder. Thank you. Councillor Richardson?
Happy to second. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from Cabinet? Any questions from other members? Councillor Field?
A question really about the relevance of this report in December. I was looking under the environment item here, and it says parking strategy, what we plan to do next quarter. Parking strategy taken to Cabinet for consideration on the 3rd of October. It's now the 5th of December. It's 2 months ago. I'm just wondering whether you feel it's still appropriate to be reporting so far in the past. 2 months is a fair chunk of a year. You would have thought if this is to be really useful to us all to see how we're doing, it should be right up to date. And it's not the sort of thing that obviously occurs once per quarter. You must keep a running record of many of the things that are reported. And I know this is a comment on the question, but the real issue, I personally lost the will to live about halfway through this report, because there's a shed load of it. If we took out all the stuff that's ancient history, you know, it'd be really much more immediate and of great interest to us, I would have thought. So just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Councillor Fleming?
Thank you very much. I have to say I rather agree, and I think it might be a matter of timing, and which possibly could be adjusted. So maybe officers could comment.
Well, I think this is a look backwards at what we have done. This is, and it does take a while for us to collate all of these statistics and provide it into a coherent set of slides. And after that, it then comes to our briefing for us to discuss and agree. And clearly you as portfolio holders also need to discuss it with your equivalent directors. So that all takes time. I don't think the time delay between the end of the quarter and it coming to us at Cabinet, I don't think that's excessive. Just wonder whether the Assistant Director or the Corporate Manager would like to add anything to that?
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Yes, just to clarify, it is intended as a look back. I appreciate that councillors might find some further information helpful in terms of that look forward, and we do try to accommodate that in terms of what we plan to do next. However, I take your point, Councillor Field, that when we're looking at a paper that talks about what we're doing next, and that's already in the past, that can be a little confusing and not very helpful. So we will pass some comments back to corporate managers and their teams to see if they can make sure that they take account of that in the commentary. And certainly as we move forward with our performance reporting and we look to revamp the whole of the sort of work that we do in this space, then we will be looking to see what further information we can bring to bring it more up to date, and that's helpful. But at the moment it is predominantly a look back at the previous quarter's performance.
Councillor Flatman?
The officer is actually, or the director, has just really said what I was going to say. I was going to say that there are what we plan to do next topics in here, so everybody knows what's going on for the next few months. But as she said, definitely it takes time to get all these figures, especially from schools, when you're trying to work out how many pupils joined in with the HAF events, etc. So,
Thank you. So this item is just for noting it only. So, oh, sorry, Councillor Mellon.
Yes, sorry, I had a question. Is that okay? Yes. It's a question on customers, which I think is page 13. And we've got some stats there about the abandon rate and the wait time, which I assume is for phone calls. The wait time's gone up to 5 minutes 41, and then we've got 28% of our calls being abandoned. I hope I've understood that correctly. That does seem a very high rate. Is that acceptable, and what are we doing to try and bring it down? Thank you.
In the customer access point, our officers in that team are very highly trained, and they have various specialisations, which makes them very attractive to other parts of our organisation. So our team in the customer access point, for instance, where they specialise in housing related queries, that makes them very attractive to the housing directorate. And so we do see significant transfer of some of our officers from the customer access point into other areas of the business, where of course their skills are really highly regarded. So we do have quite a high turnover of officers, but also when it comes to recruitment, we manage to get people coming in, but there is a really long time required in order to get the new people up to speed. And also as a result of that, the existing officers are spending their time training the new people. And so that does have a knock-on effect. And in the last, I think I can't remember now whether it's a year or 6 months, we've had 50% of our officers move around the organisation. And so that does have a lot of knock-on effect on that. And so I believe we're just one person down at the moment, but so the statistics are getting better, and the abandonment rate has decreased, and the response time is getting better. So I'm happy with the direction of travel. This report's just for noting, so thank you all for your questions. Moving on now to item 11, and this is the MCA/22/32, the cost of living crisis, our 5-point action plan, progress report and phase 2 action plan. And I'm going to invite the Cabinet Member for Communities, Health and Wellbeing to introduce this report. Councillor Flatman.
Thank you, Chair. So the cost of living crisis 5-point action plan progress report, and the purpose of the report is to inform members of our next stage. So options considered: to consider ending our coordinated approach to the cost of living crisis and to rely only on coordinating and promoting any national government support forthcoming over the next 6 months. To develop a phase 2 action plan which incorporates the learning from the past 6 months, continuing and developing the growing partnerships across the system, and which supports this work and improves access to support for our communities, both via internal colleagues and through external partners. The recommendations are to review and note the content of Phase 1 Cost of Living 5-point action plan and the dashboard report at Appendix 1. To note the focus of the Phase 2 Cost of Living action plan and Appendix 2. So if I give you a little bit more detail on those. So key information: the cost of living crisis has been building over the past few months and continues to impact on our communities in the district, particularly those who have already been experiencing inequalities pre and post the COVID-19 pandemic. It is also important to note that this impact is also being seen in groups who have previously not been on our radar, people who have never ever needed help before. So who had been managing despite some level of difficulty to maintain reliance and independence, but who are now needing to come forward for support. The predictions of impact discussed in the previous Cabinet report of the 8th for 6/22 have been realised, with warnings of 10% inflation and associated cost of living increase now in effect. The drivers for addressing the cost of living crisis were well articulated in the Cabinet report of June 22. Details of how these issues are developing are included in the dashboard report, covering the past 6 months at Appendix 1. There has been a wide range of national information and thinking to influence how we go about supporting people through the crisis, both as residents of our areas and also for our own staff who are also experiencing some of the same issues, and indeed some of our small businesses which are also experiencing these effects. Local demands are rising as evidenced by our colleagues and partners in the voluntary and community sector across the board, including the changes seen and responded to by Sudbury and our district and Mid Suffolk Citizens Advice, who have been seeing exponential increase in demands for their debt advice services. The attached 6-month dashboard provides detail of the impacts and issues arising, the work we have taken to date to address these issues, and some detail on how this has been progressed and delivered. There has been a great deal of learning and development from the initial plan, and and important to know how quickly different issues have arisen and needed a different amended approach. The approach adopted in June 22 to create a clear action plan to support both our internal coordination and our relationships and joint working with external partners has been very beneficial. It has enabled the Council to better understand the impacts across our services and customers of these changes and enabled us to focus our resource in the areas we believe will deliver the most impact. It has also supported conversations with partners and informed our priorities. The appointment of the cost of living coordinator in October has immediately made a significant difference to our ability to respond to changes, build more conversations with partners and to support our reporting. As a result of this, Phase 2 action plan has a level of embedded flexibility which allows the team delivering the opportunity to react quickly to changing circumstances, such as a new national government support funding guidance of specific local issues. We have incorporated the national and regional thinking in our responses over the last 6 months and into shaping of the Phase 2 action plan. We have changed the headings for the Phase 2 action plan to reflect the national thinking. These are now maximising income, accessing advice, food insecurity and poverty, fuel poverty, health and well-being. The Phase 2 action plan is also shaped to demonstrate where actions are responsive to the existing emerging crisis issues and also looking to the medium and longer terms to create opportunities to address the issue of the reliance and supporting people beyond their immediate crisis, to build their capacity beyond emergency measures once those key issues have been managed or met. This latter part of the work is informing our thinking about the wide range of work seeking to build in resilience for our residents most at risk. So, the recommendations today are to review and note the context of the Phase 1 Cost of Living 5-point Action Plan Dashboard Report Appendix 1 and to note the focus of Phase 2 Cost of Living Action Plan at Appendix B, which we have now put in place. I don't think I need a seconder because the paper's just to note. Is that correct, Chair?
You do need a seconder because we are voting on the...
Councillor Richardson, seconding.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, delighted to second this report, and if I may, I've got a couple of points I just want to make on this paper, because I know this is an issue that has been a cause of considerable concern throughout the year. I recall when I held the Health and Wellbeing portfolio, I was asked a question about this at full council back in January, literally beginning of the year, and obviously things have changed quite dramatically since then. Not least the invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent impact on energy costs and other commodities. But I am really pleased to see that as a council we have continually kept the situation under review and have adapted as a result to ensure that our residents get the support that they need. And I strongly welcome the detail in the appendices, both on progress to date and on the updated action plan. And I think the point that I really wanted to make here is entirely agreement with Councillor Flatman, that we continue to make the distinction between providing immediate crisis support and on developing longer-term community resilience. Because of course we want to help our residents in what we know will be some very difficult months ahead, but we shouldn't also lose sight of some of the longer-term objectives that we set out in the wellbeing strategy last year. A perfect example of this is food poverty. There is an immediate need to tackle this over the winter, but as a council I think it is really important that we sustain our focus on reducing the root causes of food poverty and the use of food banks over the longer term. And so I'm delighted to see that this is reflected in this report to balance those two priorities. And so I'm very happy to second this report. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Does any Cabinet member have any questions? Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, I'm reading about in terms of maximising income for households, where it says supporting individuals not economically active to access employment, and saying people out of work are given opportunities and advice to help them access paid employment, and thinking about how Mid-Suffolk has proactively developed the Gateway 14 site and the new big company moving in next year, talking about 1,600 new employment vacancies. And given the low level of unemployment in the Stowmarket, I'm just wondering what we can do to proactively help those people and to ensure that, you know, it's local jobs for local workers as opposed to people being bussed in from, you know, other parts of Suffolk or beyond as we develop on that site, what we can do as a communities team.
Councillor Flatman?
Oh, I'm still on. We have direct links with the Citizens Advice Bureau. They are absolutely 100% working their socks off. That's why we gave extra £30,000 to help with this crisis. They do a lot of work with people who are looking for jobs, and they refer them to other organisations. So we have that input there already. But I really don't see why we cannot lay on a careers day or off, you know, to actually showcase exactly what jobs will be coming along in the very near future. And you know, we could do that. That would be absolutely marvellous if the communities team could get involved with that with Fiona's team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Mellon?
Yeah, thank you. I've got two or three. First one is on the household support grant, or I think it's sometimes called the Household Support Fund. I hope it's the same pot of money. Obviously, we're into the third phase of that now. But in the first two phases, is it correct to say that these funds have so far mainly been used to pay off outstanding council house rent owing by a small number of families with the highest level of arrears? And if that is the case, was that the best way to use these funds or just the easiest way to use them? That's my first question.
Councillor Flatman?
I'm sorry, I don't have that detail to hand on the council rents being paid back. I don't know if my corporate manager might know that, or
Hi, I'll try and answer this question for you. In terms of the Household Support Fund, as you can see in round 3, we are trying to prioritise those in the private rented sector. So those customers have been contacted proactively, as have landlords as well, to promote that with their particular tenants. In the report, I think it does say that there were around, just need to find it, but there was a fair number of households supported through the Household Support Fund. Some of those would have been from council homes, from our particular stock. Yeah, absolutely. But all cases would have been considered on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Next question is just in terms of the theme of coordinating government support. It sometimes seems to me that we're spending money we're getting from the government, but are we actually spending any of our own funds on these sort of priorities? It's a bit difficult to work out how much of the money or the funds we're using is coming direct from government and we're just pushing it out, or is there anything of our own money that we're putting into this as well?
Councillor Flatman?
thank you. Well, definitely the £30,000 that came straight out of our pocket went to the Citizens Advice, which dramatically makes a difference, and they were here at scrutiny and they were very grateful to what we can do and how we work with them so closely. And the government money as well advertised that it does actually come, so that comes into county council and then it comes to us to distribute. But all the other activities that we are funding to work with children and our grants, all our other grants are all our own money, But saying that, we do try to maximise and meet you know, get second funding, because if we put so much money into a project, then we can get match funding, so which we have tried to do. And there'll be an all-member briefing coming up as soon as possible for this whole paper. But not only that, we are going to show exactly what money we've spent from the £1 million we had for communities. And every time we spend some money through that £1 million, we have match funding come forth. So we've almost got double bubble for what we're doing. So, you know, that a lot of these projects will be run with our own money.
Yeah, one more question then. The government has announced that households using heating oil for their main source of heating are to receive £100 support. Do we know what the mechanism for distributing this money is, and are we involved in it?
Sorry, I haven't heard yet. I don't know if...
No, I'm not sure how that's being coordinated at the moment. In terms of the work that we have been supporting is through Community Action Suffolk at the moment in terms of coordinating community oil buying schemes, but and also residents can be directed to the LWAS, which is the Local Welfare Assistance Scheme as well, and they will be provided cash if they need it, rather than any sort of money going direct into bank accounts. So that's another means of support. In terms of the government funding, I'm not sure how that's coordinated, but I will double check and respond. Okay.
Councillor Field?
Thank you. Just to add to that, I think my oil supplier, as of Friday, said that you're going to be paid through your electricity bill, which is interesting if you don't have an electricity bill, but there you go. My question is, looking at the your report, page 75, I think it says, working with partners to create a single view database and production of legally compliant data sharing agreements in progress. I wondered for how long it's been in progress, because it sort of has a familiar ring about it, things we've discussed in the distant past.
So in terms of that particular action item, so that is on the look back, so that was the past 6 months, so that was from the original cost of living 5-point plan, and it was one of the actions that we had agreed to look into. The reason that it is on there as in progress is because we are now working with the Suffolk Office of Data and Analytics to take on that work. So it's actually something across then the county, also with districts and boroughs, and also VCSEs to create more of a shared view of our data across a wider network. So that is why it is an in progress piece of work for now.
So thanks for that. I always, in distant past, as a county councillor, one was told that there's significant GDPR issues there, and exchanging data between a number of those agencies, like the Health Service and the County Council, is essentially forbidden, or at least very difficult to do. So that was the reason for the question. It sounds like a good thing to be doing, but it could be extremely difficult to get organised. Any comments would be welcome.
Yes, so that's why the Suffolk Office of Data and Analytics are looking at it, because they're working across all of those different partners to agree that process, because as you say, it is quite complex and it does require data sharing agreements across all of those different partners. So it is currently being looked at by the Suffolk County Council team at present.
Thank you. So I'm now going to open up for debate. Does Cabinet wish to have a conversation? Okay, so the recommendations are to review and note the contents of the Phase 1 Cost of Living 5-point Action Plan Dashboard Report at Appendix 1, and to note the focus of the Phase 2 Cost of Living Action Plan at Appendix 2. I'm now going to ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is in progress. That is 8 votes for. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. So that's the end of the meeting. Thank you everybody for your participation. The next meeting is scheduled for Monday the 9th of January 2023 at 10:30. Meeting closed. Thank you everybody.